Tonight we're heading into one of the strangest chapters in American paranormal history. A moment when the woods of Pennsylvania didn't just whisper mystery, they screamed it. And for almost 2 years, an entire region found itself caught between worlds. UFOs hovering silently above farm fields, glowing orbs drifting through the treetops, and towering hair-covered creatures stalking the dark edges of rural roads. This wasn't a simple sighting or even a series of coincidences. This was a convergence, a flap, where UFOs and Bigfoots appeared together, sometimes in the same place.
1, 2, 3, 4.
What is up? Welcome to the Hauntological Society. I'm your ghost host, Erik. And today we have an interesting story. We're going to be talking about the UFO Bigfoot Pennsylvania flap. If you don't know what a flap is, it's a term used in the paranormal world where there's a concentrated area of activity, usually surrounding one particular phenomenon like UFOs or Bigfoots. But this case today is an interesting case because it actually covers two different types of paranormal phenomenon, UFOs and Bigfoots. And it asks the questions, do they belong together or are they separate? Who knows? Maybe we'll come up with some kind of hypothesis after this story. But I think this is a very interesting story that we really need to talk about. It begs the question, what exactly was going on in Pennsylvania? What exactly is the paranormal and how should we look at it going forward? So I think it's a very important thing to research and look into and think about. And I would just like to say, by the way, I just want to apologize ahead if I sound weird when I enunciate words or do something strange. I had to have some surgery on my mouth on Friday, and so I am speaking kind of out of the side of my mouth, but I wanted to make sure I got this episode recorded so that I could get it out for you guys to enjoy. So I hope you guys do enjoy the story. Now, I think without further ado, we're going to talk about some Bigfoots and UFOs. But first, let's start talking about the PGF film, the Patterson-Gimlin film. And I think everybody's seen that. It's the most famous Bigfoot film ever recorded. Everybody knows this. It's the one where Patty walks across the dry river bed, turns around, looks back at the camera, and then walks away. And in my opinion, could be one of the few true Bigfoot films ever recorded. In today's world, with the rise of platforms like YouTube and TikTok, it's getting harder and harder to tell what's real and what isn't. With AI advancing at the rate it is, we're living in a time where seeing is no longer believing. And I'll be honest, some of those takes are really good. Now, I personally get a kick out of the Bigfoot videos floating around TikTok. I think they go by the Sasquatch Boys or something like that. You'll see Bigfoot popping up in the most ridiculous, over-the-top situations, like stealing a cop car or, I don't know, messing with people who are camping, something like that. And you just have to laugh. And that's the point. Those videos aren't meant to be taken seriously. They're entertainment. A break from the weight of the real world, which in today's world is something that we all desperately need. It's a good laugh. But then there's the other side of it. See, if you follow Bigfoot at all, you've probably heard about yet another documentary that's aiming to debunk the Patterson-Gimlin film. It's the same story we've heard over and over again. Same claims, the same names. The Bob Hieronymus was the man in the suit, and that the costume supposedly came from Philip Morris Costumes, which coincidentally is made here in North Carolina. And I also think it's funny because Philip Morris is the guy who's over like Marlboro cigarettes. And then the company is Philip Morris, and they're also based out of North Carolina. I think it's just a weird coincidence. It doesn't really mean anything. But it's a narrative that refuses to die. But let's get back to what we do know. In 1958, a man named Jerry Crew discovered massive footprints near his construction site at Bluff Creek. The media got a hold of the story, and just like that, the term Bigfoot was born. And not long after that, a man named Roger Patterson became obsessed. He didn't just want to find the Bigfoot. He wanted to prove it to the world, and his plan was ambitious. Film the creature. Capture undeniable evidence and show people something that they couldn't explain away. So he teamed up with a friend, Bob Gimlin. Together they set out into the wilderness of Bluff Creek. Now, it's my understanding that he had to really kind of like convince Bob to like take part in this filming. I don't know why Bob was kind of reluctant at first, but it was almost like he wanted to do it, but didn't want to do it maybe. But anyway, he talked him into it. And, you know, of course, we know the rest is history. But here's where things start to blur. There were claims, rumors really, that their neighbor, Bob Hieronymus, was approached to wear a suit for the film, that he'd be paid $1,000, and that maybe even the horses used in the expedition belonged to him. But then something happened. Something changed. As Patterson and Gimlin rode along a dry creek bed, something stepped out of the tree line. Not staged, not expected. Something real. And what they captured became one of the most analyzed, debated, and scrutinized pieces of film in history. The creature, Patty, as she's so-called, walks across the frame with a fluid, almost human stride. But then she turns, looks directly at the camera, and disappears back into the forest. A couple things to know about when she turns. Number one, she can't turn her neck. Also, when she turns, you can see muscles on her neck bulge. You can see the muscles in her legs bulging. And she appears to have very large breasts, which is why she's called a female. That moment has been picked apart for decades. By the way, I have a photo of like Patty and Bob Hieronymus in the suit, and I'll post it on our socials. It does not match. The late Jeffrey Meldrum, a PhD in anatomical sciences and one of the foremost experts in physical anthropology, studied the footage extensively. His conclusion? The movement didn't match a man in the suit. He pointed to the muscle definition in the thighs and glutes, the natural motion beneath the skin, the visible anatomy of the foot, what's known as the mid-tarsal break, and something not found in humans but seen in primates. Details that are incredibly difficult to fake, even in 1967. And if you don't believe me, just look at the gorilla costumes used in Planet of the Apes. All they are is a mask and gloves, because that's the only type of technology that existed at that time to create a quote-unquote lifelike suit. Now, I could go on about the Patterson-Gimlin film, and trust me, I easily could. But tonight, I want to take you somewhere even stranger. Because the question isn't just whether Bigfoot is real anymore. The question is, what is it? Even within the Bigfoot community, there's a divide. Some believe it's flesh and blood, an undiscovered species, maybe even a surviving relic like Gigantopithecus, a massive primate that once roamed Asia and stood nearly 9 feet tall before disappearing from the fossil record. Others believe something far more unsettling. That Bigfoot isn't just an animal, but something interdimensional. A being that slips in and out of our reality. Something that doesn't follow the rules of the natural world. I know what you're saying, but just hear me out. Just keep an open mind. I'm not telling you this is what the answer is. I'm just giving you different ideas and perspectives. And when you start going down that road, something else begins to creep in. Because the same kinds of theories exist in UFO world too. What are UFOs? Where do they come from? Are they extraterrestrial or something else entirely? Every once in a while, these two mysteries will collide. Witnesses don't just see something in the sky. They see something in the trees. Lights. Something watching from the darkness. So the question becomes, what happens when Bigfoots and UFOs show up at the same time? Because in the 1970s, the forest of Pennsylvania, that's exactly what people claimed was happening. And what unfolded there was something that still doesn't make sense. In the lonely hills and shadow hollows of southwestern Pennsylvania, Something strange moved through the trees in the early 70s. Something that didn't fit neatly into any category of the known world. Under cold Appalachian skies, farmers, police officers, teenagers, church-going families all reported encounters with glowing discs in the night sky one moment and towering hair-covered creatures the next. Strange lights zipped across cow pastures. Metallic craft hovered slightly above barns. And in the dark edges of the forest, eyes glowed back, green, red, or amber, belonging to something massive, something bipedal, something that left behind footprints heavier than any living animal should print into the ground. This was not just a UFO wave. It was not just a Bigfoot wave. This was something that merged both worlds, an eruption of high strangeness that defied classification and rewrote the boundaries of the paranormal. Between 1972 and 74, Pennsylvania became the epicenter of one of the most intense, unsettling, and interconnected series of encounters ever recorded. A flap where UFOs, orbs, and Bigfoots did not only appear separately, but together, often on the same night, sometimes in the same fields. Tonight, here at the Hauntological Society, we step into that liminal space, into abandoned farms and cold moonlit meadows to follow the timeline of a phenomenon that refuses to make sense. And this is the story of the Pennsylvania UFO Bigfoot flap. Now, the story of Pennsylvania UFO Bigfoot flap, that's a mouthful, by the way, it's funny. The story of the Pennsylvania UFO Bigfoot flap unfolds across wooded hills, farm valleys, and lonely back roads of southwestern Pennsylvania. A region already steeped in legends long before the 70s wave began. Generations earlier, native communities spoke of luminous sky beings and strange creatures moving through the deep woods. By the mid-20th century, the same region along the Chestnut Ridge had gained a reputation among investigators as a window area, a place where boundaries between categories, UFOs, cryptids, orbs, hauntings, they seemed to blur against this backdrop. The events of 1972 to 74 emerged as one of the most concentrated periods of high strangeness ever documented in North America. Now, the flap did not erupt all at once. Its earliest rumblings began in late 1972, when scattered reports of large bipedal creatures circulated quietly among hunters and rural families. These early sightings came primarily in Westmoreland, Greene, and Fayette counties. Witnesses described tall, shadowy forms moving through the fields of dusk. Creatures whose eyes reflected amber or green light, and whose presence was sometimes accompanied by a strange, sulfurous odor. At the same time, people began noticing wandering lights in the night sky, small, glowing spheres, drifting across the farmland or pacing alongside vehicles. Investigators at that time took note of these events, but nothing yet suggested the massive convergence that was soon to follow. By the early months of 1973, Pennsylvania was experiencing a remarkable surge in UFO activity. Throughout February and March, witnesses began reporting brilliant orbs hovering low over the ground, disc-shaped objects silently gliding above barns, and luminous spheres that descended into fields before fading away. Some of these sightings were made by multiple members of the same household. Others were reported independently by neighbors of the same night. Police departments received an unusual number of calls, and local newspapers published articles acknowledging that southwestern Pennsylvania was becoming an unexpected hotspot. This wave of sighting, based purely on numbers alone, formed one of the most significant UFO concentrations in American history. It was in the spring and summer of 1973, however, that the situation took its strangest turn. While UFO reports continued at a steady pace, rural residents also began encountering towering hair-covered creatures that resembled the legendary Bigfoot. Now, these descriptions were strikingly consistent. Witnesses described creatures between 7 and 9 feet tall, covered in dark brown or reddish hair, with long arms and glowing eyes that reflected red, green, or orange when struck by headlights or flashlights. Many encounters were accompanied by deep, resonant screams that echoed across valleys, or by an overpowering odor that made observers nauseous. Investigators discovered enormous footprints, some measuring up to 16 inches in length. A number of these prints displayed only 3 toes, an anatomical detail that at odds with any known primate, and one that quickly became one of the most debated aspects of the entire flap. Now, as the summer wore on, researchers, specifically Stan Gordon and his volunteer investigation team, noticed an unsettling pattern. UFO sightings and Bigfoot encounters were no longer separate phenomena. They were occurring on the same nights in the same rural areas, sometimes only minutes apart. A farmer might see a glowing orb sweep across the field after sunset, only to hear fanatic barking and witness a massive shape moving near his barn hours later. A family might watch a silently hovering craft near their driveway, and immediately afterward notice heavy footsteps circling around the edge of their property. In several cases, witnesses report seeing a bright light rise from the woods at the exact location where screams or heavy movements had been heard earlier that day. The frequency of these overlapping events gave investigators the first indication that something highly unusual was unfolding. Now, the crescendo of the entire flap occurred on the night of October 25th, 1973, in the Uniontown region of Fayette County. Shortly after 9 p.m., a teenage boy and 2 other witnesses observed a large, glowing red sphere descending into a farm pasture. Believing they had just witnessed an aircraft in distress, the group approached the field to offer assistance. But as they moved closer, the object emitted a brilliant burst of white light, illuminating the pasture, and in that moment, they saw 2 enormous hair-covered creatures walking near a fence line. Both figures stood roughly 7 to 8 feet tall, with long arms and glowing green eyes, and the creatures seemed unfazed by the witnesses' flashlights. One of the men was carrying a rifle, and in a moment of panic, fired several shots at the figures, but the creatures did not react. Neither did they flee nor respond aggressively. They simply stood, continued walking along the fence line as though the bullets had no effect. Now, a state trooper responded to the subsequent call for assistance and had arrived to find the animals on the property in a state of clear fear. The dogs refused to go outside, cattle were clustered together and restless, and there was a faintly glowing, illuminated patch in the field where the object had landed. In the hours and days that followed, several witnesses experienced nosebleeds, nausea, eye irritation, and a sense of dissociation, as if they had been momentarily pulled into a dreamlike state. This single incident involving both a landed, unidentified object and 2 humanoid creatures became one of the most extraordinary and controversial cases in the entire history of UFO and Bigfoot research. In the weeks following the October event, the region was saturated with reports of strange lights and creatures. People described orbs ranging from size from marbles to basketballs, glowing in colors from white and blue to orange and red. Some of the orbs displayed intelligent movement, changing direction abruptly or hovering inches above the ground. But in several cases, the lights appeared to rise up from the forest floor or sink directly into the earth, as if passing between dimensions. Meanwhile, Bigfoot sightings continued, and in rare instances, witnesses claimed to see 2 or even 3 creatures traveling together. Electrical interference became a notable characteristic of the wave. Car engines stalled when lights passed overhead, radios crackled with bursts of static, and televisions distorted during orb sightings. Tracks were found in the snow or mud that sometimes continued for dozens of yards before stopping abruptly in open fields with no indication of where the creature had gone next. Now, by early 1974, the wave had begun to slowly diminish. A handful of significant encounters still took place, including sightings of a large, white-furred creature crossing a rural road, and reports of a UFO landing on a hillside that left behind a scorched area. But by the summer of that year, the high volume activity characteristics of the flap had largely ended. Nevertheless, investigators were left with hundreds of eyewitness accounts that refused to conform to traditional explanations. The events had displayed characteristics of both physical and psychic phenomenon. Witnesses observed solid objects and biological creatures, yet many also reported feelings of time distortion, irrational fear, and altered states of awareness. And in the decades that followed, researchers drew multiple theories from the Pennsylvania Flap. The Chestnut Ridge came to be viewed as a window area, a region where multiple forms of anomalous activity overlap. The Flap challenged conventional thinking by presenting Bigfoot in direct proximity to UFOs, suggesting that the two phenomena might share a deeper origin. Many investigators began considering the possibility that orbs, creatures, and craft were different manifestations of a larger interconnected phenomenon. Some theories proposed interdimensional interpretations. Others suggested that these events hinted at a reality layered with forces or beings that do not behave according to biological or technological advanced expectations. Today, the Pennsylvania Ufo Bigfoot Flap remains one of the most important high strange events in American paranormal history. It demonstrated that categories we use, extraterrestrial, cryptid, ghost, orbs, they may be artificial divisions imposed on phenomena that do not respect those boundaries. And in many ways, the 1972 to 74 flap anticipated the mixed phenomenon activity later reported in locations such as Skinwalker Ranch, Marley Woods, the Bridgewater Triangle, and the Brown Mountain Lights in North Carolina. But in each of these places, witnesses described not a single isolated mystery, but an ecosystem of anomalies interacted in unpredictable ways. The Pennsylvania Wave was one of the earliest and clearest examples of that convergence, and it remains a cornerstone of high strangeness research precisely because it refuses to resolve neatly into any one explanation. Instead, it invites us to consider that the world is far more complex, layered, and haunting than we typically allow ourselves to imagine. Maybe what happened in Pennsylvania wasn't an invasion at all, but a revelation, a moment where the veil between the seen and unseen thinned, just enough for us to catch a glimpse of something older than our understanding. The farmers, hunters, police officers, they became unwilling witnesses to a crossing, participants in a story that has no beginning and no end. The lights over Chestnut Ridge didn't come to visit us. They came to remind us. They remind us that the world is not as neatly ordered as we like to think, that in the quiet hours between dusk and dawn, the boundaries between the physical and the spiritual, the natural and the supernatural dissolve like fog. What if the creatures weren't visitors, but reflections, echoes of something we once knew how to see? Maybe the lights in the sky and footprints in the dirt are both footprints of consciousness, traces of a larger reality brushing against our own. Maybe Bigfoot isn't the mystery. Maybe we are. And so, as the last of the glowing orbs sank into the Pennsylvania earth and the woods fell silent again, the story didn't end. It just went underground, waiting for the next time that we dare look into the dark and ask the oldest question in human history. What's out there? Or maybe the better question is, what's still here, watching us back? Now, as a person who loves all things paranormal, I love to hear the stories of Bigfoot and ghosts, UFOs. I don't know where I stand when it comes to what is it. I'm a purist, and to be honest with you, I would love to think that Bigfoot is just an ape and UFOs are created by aliens just to come here to investigate us, known as the nuts and bolts theory. Or that a spirit is just a person who has passed. But the truth is, it's hard to say because the paranormal isn't very straightforward. It's what makes the paranormal truly unknown. And for me, I love the mystery and the questions because I love to solve the puzzles and riddles. And so it keeps me questioning everything, and I spend many nights deep in thought about what it was that I have seen or what others have told me they have seen. And so I'll leave you with this final thought. Don't ever stop asking questions, because even though Occam's razor is the simplest explanation, does it really solve the riddles? Don't settle for what it seems, but continue to explore, because I think that we may discover in the future it's going to change us forever. But until that day, I'll see you back here at the Hauntological Society. And don't forget to check out our socials. We have Facebook, Instagram, the Hauntological Society podcast. There's even a group page for the Hauntological Society. We have merch that's linked on all our pages. Thanks to Jeremy Underwood for mastering all our episodes for us, taking the time to remaster the ones that I've already recorded. And check out his band, Hellen's Bridge. And come back and visit us next week for more episodes of the Hauntological Society. But until then, I'm your ghost host, Erik, and I'm out.